All right, our next assignment is a digital painting assignment. It's a new technique. I'm going to start in Photoshop. This will kind of only exist in Photoshop. We're just going to control every pixel and make them ourselves. I'm going to use, I guess, my standard size, 13 by 19 inches by 350. And then I'm going to do a quick speed painting of a hot dog. So I might rotate that to be horizontal. Then I'm going to make a new layer and lock the background layer. Call it blank white. This is like my primed canvas or my stretched watercolor paper, and I want to leave it clean. And now on top of it, this is going to be my sketch layer. So a lot like digital coloring, you work on blank white and you add colors in. So in order to paint something, I need to have reference. And so I like the look of this hot dog right here. You can basically see here's basically a digital coloring version of that hot dog without an outline, with the outline taken out. Here's another one. These are like vector images. That shows the local colors pretty well. But I want the actual hot dog. I just don't like the angle that one is. So let me see. On a white background, that's great. Oh, the hamburger would be great fun to do too. Let's see. It's a tough thing to compose and make look good. All right, so let's go with this one. That's pretty nice. I like the paper underneath it. It's got quite a few colors. So I'm going to save that reference. Doesn't matter if it's high resolution or not. This one happens to be, but it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to open that up with Photoshop. And I'm going to put them side by side. So I do that by clicking on my sketch area, going to Window, Arrange, and then because these are both horizontal, I'm going to tile up horizontal. Right? Then I'm going to go to my bottom one, and I'm going to shrink it in the window. So it's pretty small. Drag this one down. Come on. This is very picky. I'm going to find that divider. Come on. Oh, why can't they make this easier? I swear I'm actually trying. There we go. Move that down. Okay, because that's really all I need to see of it. Now, another tool that's actually really useful for quick painting is called the Navigator. So I'm going to go to Window and turn on the Navigator window. It's right here. I can try to move it right into my bar right there so it doesn't take up so much room. And it's a nice little snapshot of my whole screen, so I don't always have to be zooming in and out. Okay, now for my sketch. This is painting, not line art. So instead of just a standard brush with a color like that, I could sketch, linearly, like with a pencil and kind of block shapes in and then paint on top of it. But then I'd have to get rid of all my lines. And that's one way to go, especially if you need really kind of tight control. And that's probably how I'll start my portrait. But for this, I can paint with a much bigger brush. And so you'll see a lot of brush options built into Photoshop. For instance, big brush like this. It's like a bristle flat brush. A fan brush. But they're all a little artificial looking to me. So I tend to make my own brushes. There are these other options you could play with. These are actually pretty good, especially once you learn how to modify them, but I'll show you all of that. The problem with making your own brushes is you won't be allowed to change the hardness of them. They are what they are, but you can modify other things about them. So this is what you're going to do first. you're going to make kind of a messy design that's pretty thick. And we are right now designing a brush. Make it as complicated or as simple as you like, but do make it fairly contained in its shape. Okay, so I just designed a brush. Now I go to Edit. Let's see. And I say Define Brush Preset, but it's not allowing me to do that because I think I need to have a flattened image. So let me just flatten this really, or not unlock it anyway. And flatten it. Usually I'll do this in a separate file. So why don't I do it the way I usually do it? Because this is 13 by 19 inches. This is a little too big for a brush. So I'm going to say File, New, just really quickly. And I'm going to make this basically, let's do 1200 pixels by 1200 pixels. Notice pixels there. And I'm going to make my brush. And just for ease, I'm going to make it with black. So you notice as I'm making this, all my strokes are going in the exact same direction. We can change the brush so that that doesn't always happen. And I can also erase from it. So I'm going to use another brush as my eraser. My eraser will be my background color though. So I want that to be white. And I'll cut against this a little bit. Break up my brush a little bit. Now you can customize brushes in all sorts of ways, for all sorts of reasons. So this is my kind of crazy brush. Now how do I make it a brush? I say Edit, Define Brush Preset. And then I can name it Carl Paintbrush 1. And then say OK. And now, if I deleted everything, filled it with white, now I have that as a single brush at that size. There it is. And I have options for it. So if I select that brush, I can make it a lot smaller. I can paint with it. And you can see it's not that different than those customized brushes in Photoshop. So let's customize it even more. I can go to Window and the brush options. And the brush options that I like most are Shape Dynamics at the very top. Click on that. And we can control the size jitter, which means that it won't always come off of the brush in the same shape. And then the minimum diameter I can play with. And then the control of the size jitter, I want to make pin pressure because I'm using a stylus. So I can make it go thick to thin. I can play with the angle jitter so that it's not always showing from the same. You see how the stylus is rotating a little bit. And that's going to be a good effective brush for me, just with shape dynamics. There's a lot of other things I can do. I could scatter it and have the brush create kind of an airbrush filter. I can have that randomize, but I don't want that right now. I just want shape dynamics and make it a basic brush. Okay, now I go back to my original and I'm going to do a speed painting. Let me erase that sketch. And I'm going to use my new brush. And I can change its size. I'm going to make it pretty big to begin with, especially because I have shape dynamics on, so the harder I press, the less it will fill. Okay. I have brush options right here, so at any time I can mess with these and fix them. And I can control my angle jitter with pin tilt if I have that option, or also with pin pressure. All right, yeah, so now it's going to just kind of change angle randomly, which I like. Now, why do I have my reference open in Photoshop? Well, it's so I can steal colors. So now I have my brush, I have my canvas, I have my reference, I'm on a sketch layer. All I have to do is hit Option, and it changes my brush to a paint dropper. So that's how I get my colors. I'm going to get a local color for the hot dog, I'm going to paint that in. Nice and fast. Notice how all the edges are pretty sharp. Get a nice local color for that hot dog bun, paint that in. Remember, everything needs to be painted, even the lights. So the edge of the hot dog bun is this lighter tone. I'm going to paint that in. I got the relish. I'm going to paint that in. Nice local color for it. I can always steal from myself and get more. I've got the onions. And dot those in. And I've got the shadow side of the hot dog, which is extending out over here. So now I'm going to start adding to my local colors. I'll do the ketchup and the mustard once I'm done with the meat itself. And now I'm starting to do hard edge duotone. But everything's at 100% opacity. Stealing colors from my reference with this big open brush. So this hard edge duotone now, you can start to see the hot dog come into focus, come into shape. I have all of these steps outlined for you in that handout on the links page about the digital coloring and digital painting primer. And I like to have that always open. So right now I'm at this duotone phase of digital painting. Duotone hard edges. So everything looks sharp and defined. I'm just finding the right colors for the right places. And each time I do it, I'm helping to define the hot dog a little bit. And remember, white is just the background. So everything I paint. Now for my next phase, as I get into softening edges, I'm going to make a duplicate of that blank white background, or just make a new background and fill it with gray. Edit, fill, 50% gray. And that will help me see my tones a little bit better. I'm going to lock that, go back to my sketch layer, and now you can do it a bunch of different ways. You can paint on top of your duotone sketch, but I think I'm going to soften right within the sketch layer. So how do I start softening? Because I'm not able with my custom brush to change its hardness. So what I do to soften is I take its opacity way down to about 50%. And then I select colors from my own reference, and I let them overlap at 50%. So if I need gradations, like the hot dog bun here, I paint pretty aggressively with the low opacity and start stealing colors from myself. You see how that starts to soften the edge. This is very much how you would do kind of quick blending and softening of edges with oil paint, with acrylic. How you would wet a brush in watercolor to soften your edges. The key to effective digital painting in my mind is not jumping between lots of different tools. Now, why do I have the Navigator open? Well, you can see how that hot dog is coming out, from a distance. And I know I have to have a pretty dark shadow underneath this. But better, because it varies, I'm going to put that in with this low opacity. And then I'm going to blend up against it. So once you have your local hard-edged duotone color behind everything, it's pretty safe to start blending within those colors. And yet every mark has consequences.